What is bipolar disorder? It is defined by the federal government under IDEA under the category of emotional disturbance, which is defined below. More specifically, bipolar disorder is a mental disability that occurs when a person experiences episodes of mania followed by episodes of depression. The length of these episodes varies from person to person. Each comes with a unique set of struggles. During a manic episode, the person feels very energetic and happy, often having a high level of self-confidence. Additionally, a person will have racing thoughts and ideas that continually flood in, and the person feels like they need to be completed at that moment. This causes an increase in impulsivity, which can vary from reading about a tropical island and immediately booking tickets, buying a bathing suit and packing, or simply being in class and blurting out the answer. Mania can also cause people to do dangerous activities that they wouldn't normally do. Those who are experiencing a manic episode do not require a lot of sleep, and they often can't sleep when they have an idea or goal in mind. A depressive episode consists of the exact opposite of a manic episode. During depression, someone with bipolar disorder is lethargic and fatigued. He or she has a lack of motivation to do anything and feels as if effort is worthless. Depression also causes an obsession with death, such as attempting suicide or planning one out. It is also important to note that depression in children can sometimes be seen as excessive frustration and anger. Here's a video of Laura Bain's TED Talk that is entitled Living with Bipolar Type 2, in which she explains her personal experience with bipolar disorder. In this clip, she does a great job of describing the conflicting emotions she feels during mania and depression, and how it is a struggle to live with your emotions at such a conflict.
So, what's it like to be manic? Well, it's kind of like wearing really gorgeous heels like this. And you just walk around and you feel taller. There's a confidence. There's a direction to it. Things are clear and easy. There are thoughts and ideas that just come so naturally. Ideas, ambitions, hopes, anything is possible. The world is limitless. The trouble comes when these thoughts don't stop. When it goes beyond control, when you can't will yourself to sleep. Because you can't stop thinking of the creative project that you want to do tomorrow, or the next trip you want to go on, or your new life plan. Then there's the other side of things, the depression side. Well, depression is more like slippers. Not the comfy, cozy kind of slipper feeling. It's more of the need to feel safe and secure, that outside of these slippers, it's just not right. And it's kind of awkward walking around in slippers, giving a talk in front of 400 people, being depressed amongst classmates and family and friends and roommates. And with depression, there's also comes these kind of winter glasses where things just seem darker. It's out of focus. The lenses are distorted, and it's difficult to see farther ahead. So bipolar is kind of like wearing the depressed slipper on one foot and a hypomanic heel on the other. This is such a contrast. You know, on one foot, you're walking around, just up on an adventure, ready to go and see the world, and then you fall down and just can barely get out of bed and just drag along.
So now that you know the symptoms of bipolar disorder, how do both mania and depression affect cognition? Those with bipolar disorder are not intellectually below their peers, but they do have symptoms that affect how they learn. Students with bipolar disorder have trouble focusing on one task at a time. As a result, when reading or studying, the child often will not be able to recall any information that was just read. An additional difficulty with memorization makes it hard to test students with bipolar disorder effectively. Furthermore, the constant train of thought that mania presents makes those with bipolar disorder need to complete certain tasks at the exact time that they come to mind. One of the main problems that people with bipolar disorder face is that mania and depression often cancel each other out. While mania may provide a student with great ideas, he or she often does not have the energy or desire to carry it out once depression hits. It is important to reiterate that those who have bipolar disorder are just as capable as peers to keep up with the curriculum, but symptoms of the disability often hinder the student's desire to work hard or ability to focus, allowing them to fall behind academically. Those with bipolar disorder often have trouble socially, as many students with emotional or behavioral disorders have antisocial behaviors such as limited interpersonal skills, verbal and physical aggression, and coercive tendencies that make it difficult for them to get along with both peers and adults. Children with bipolar disorder are often prone to frustration and anger. These are qualities that may be off-putting to peers. A child who often yells out answers in class and gets in fights with students and teachers isn't necessarily the child that sustains a lot of friendships. Also, those with bipolar disorder sometimes have trouble distinguishing between what behaviors are appropriate in some environments and not in others. An example would be the confusion a child would have when he was allowed to yell out on the playground, but then was scolded for doing so in class. Because of this, students with bipolar disorder often benefit from explicit instruction, such as being told what behavior should be displayed when. A good way to teach this is through social stories, so that the child can understand real-life examples that he or she may come across and how to react to each scenario. Since bipolar disorder is classified as an emotional disturbance, its symptoms are commonly expressed through over-the-top emotions. Those who have it often feel their frustration, anger, sadness, or joy more strongly than peers. While there are no physical signs to detect whether or not a person has the overall disorder, there are some physical cues that a teacher or parent can observe to see whether a child is in a manic or depressive state. During mania, the child has rapid thoughts coming in one after the other. Because of this, he or she may talk quickly and may not be able to be understood. Additionally, the child will have trouble staying on task and may physically be moving around the classroom. He or she may also blurt out answers in class, as the insight that a person with bipolar disorder experiences after the teacher asks a question needs to be expressed at that moment. The physical clues for a child during a depressive episode would be looking tired or slumped over, and possibly significant weight loss or gain. How does bipolar disorder both enhance and restrict a student in the classroom? It is important to begin with the strengths that a person with bipolar disorder brings both to his or her own education, but also to everyone else's in the classroom. Bipolar disorder brings about a lot of struggles for students academically, so it's important to help those who have it use their strengths to their advantage. Mania is a time period where the child will be energetic and have thoughts going a mile a minute. While this can be perceived as a bad thing and a way to keep the child unfocused, it also brings about fantastic ideas that the child could use to complete assignments or discover a new way to solve a problem. Children who have bipolar disorder are very creative and imaginative. They just need an effective strategy to either slow down these thoughts or be able to get them down on paper so that they're not wasted and soon forgotten. Additionally, a child who has bipolar disorder is constantly cycling through episodes of mania followed by episodes of depression. The two sets of emotions contrast each other, and the child is constantly feeling high and then low. This gives them strengthened emotional awareness and intuitiveness. That way, they are more cognizant of how their peers are feeling, being more capable of detecting whether classmates are frustrated or sad. Those with bipolar disorder can give understanding to peers and give them coping mechanisms to help them handle their frustration or sadness. In regards to challenges, a lot of the symptoms of mania, depression, and oftentimes even medication for bipolar disorder, cause a child to struggle in the classroom. Students who have bipolar disorder are energetic, impulsive, do not sit still, and are at times unmotivated. These are characteristics that are the exact opposite of what school values in a good student. Therefore, those with bipolar disorder may feel awkward and uneasy in a classroom setting before even entering one. Another aspect of bipolar disorder that causes students to have trouble in school is the fact that it acts like two completely different disorders. It is one thing if a child has one set of symptoms and learns to manage and best accommodate to them, but a child with bipolar disorder needs different strategies for both mania and depression. It is difficult for a child with this disability to be emotionally stable, as the child's body is constantly cycling through mania and depression and varies from week to week. Some of the specific challenges a child with bipolar disorder faces are trouble concentrating or staying organized, difficulty focusing on one task at a time, trouble motivating oneself, and trouble paying attention. For the most part, the challenges associated with depression are related to motivation. If the student feels as if school is useless and that putting forth effort is too difficult, he or she will easily fall behind. Those who are depressed may even miss days of school at a time and will miss out on important material. Or they may not complete assignments, presenting themselves as lazy to a teacher who does not understand the disorder. On the other hand, the challenges presented during mania are due to the flow of ideas that the child feels compelled to follow through with instantly. As a result, he or she will have trouble focusing, staying on task, and organizing both thoughts and school materials such as assignments and schedules. So now that we know all the symptoms, strengths, and challenges for a student with bipolar disorder, how can we accommodate for them in the classroom? The main thing teachers have to remember is that mania and depression will require different sets of accommodations, and what works for one child may not work for another. For a child who is manic, the teacher can give the student strategies to appropriately manage his or her frustration and tendency to be impulsive. This can be done through a variety of ways. The child can step out of class for a short walk if he or she feels upset, or could be taught breathing exercises for relaxation. Additionally, similar to a child with ADHD, a squeeze ball could be effective not only in helping the child focus and occupy the mind, but a way for him or her to release anger. Lastly, a toolkit, which is a box that contains activities in the categories of physical activity, creative thinking, social activity, and rest or relaxation, can be placed at the back of the classroom or in another room. When the child feels overwhelmed or upset, he or she can take a few moments to calm down, eliminating the chance for undesirable behaviors. These strategies are effective for the child because they all teach him or her how to be responsible in controlling one's emotions. This is a useful skill outside of the classroom, so the child is able to understand what to do appropriately to remove themselves from a negatively stemming situation and how to cope with frustration and anger on their own. Additionally, accommodations are needed for when the child has racing thoughts. Since the generation of ideas that occurs during mania can be used to the child's advantage, it is important to give the student an outlet to get down that information so it can be used. This can be done by giving the student an iPad, because it's faster to type than to write with pen and paper. Furthermore, once ideas are written down, the teacher should encourage the student to continually go back and reform the ideas, so that when he or she hits an inevitable depression and feels unmotivated to do a project, there's already an outline present. Lastly, for a student who is experiencing mania and is overly distractive, it's crucial to limit excessive distractions as much as possible. This can be done by giving the child preferential seating away from windows, talkative students, or even bookcases and toys. The teacher can also limit the number of posters or things hanging on the walls, and he or she can remove excessive pictures or graphs from handouts or assignments. For students experiencing a depressive episode, a new set of strategies will be required to help the child reach his or her full potential. Most strategies needed during depression are those that increase motivation for the child and make him or her want to participate in class. Incorporating the student's interests is a great way to get them interested in the lesson, or the teacher could even allow the student to teach a lesson he or she is passionate about. Another strategy would be giving rewards for the completion of a task, such as a sticker for handing in a project early, or 15 minutes on the iPad for a week without any behaviors in the classroom. It is also important for students with bipolar disorder to see the classroom as a stable environment. Simply putting the schedule on the board and letting the child know if there are any changes in the normal routine will help him or her feel more comfortable and in control, and therefore more willing to come to school. Lastly, a child who is depressed or even manic may benefit from extra time to complete assignments or examinations. Students with bipolar disorder have difficulty with concentration and recollecting information, and extra time would allow them the leisure to step away for a moment if needed to refocus. There are so many resources that a teacher can turn to learn more about bipolar disorder. The first step in helping a child with a disability is to understand that disability. Resources like TED Talks, such as the one from earlier in the presentation, offer a first-hand account of what it's like to live with bipolar disorder, which will increase a teacher's understanding of what the child is going through. Books are also a great resource, both in educating teachers on the disability, but also in aiding him or her teach young children about the disability too. I also discovered that the National Alliance on Mental Illness has a program where they'll come to a school and provide a presentation to parents and teachers. The program gives information on how to detect signs of emotional disturbance in students and how to provide services and a supportive environment for the student. This resource would provide school staff with a heightened idea of the gravity of mental illness and would in turn aid each student in the school. The last and most important resource is the specific child. A teacher can do an immense amount of research on bipolar disorder, but the reality is that the disability will present itself differently in each child. The child or even the child's family will know what strategies are most effective, and additionally, it would be useful for the child to let the teacher know how he or she is feeling that day, so the child knows how to present the lesson most effectively. The book I read was entitled An Unquiet Mind and was written by Kay Redfield Jamison. She had an interesting perspective on bipolar disorder, as she was diagnosed with it at the same time she was studying to become a psychiatrist herself. She exhibited a lot of the traditional symptoms of bipolar disorder. She explained in her book that she had trouble reading or studying because she would read a paragraph over and over again without any recollection of the information she just read after she had finished. She also, when manic, would spend a lot of money without any idea of the consequences. She would go to a bookstore and buy 20 books, or one day she even decided out of the blue to buy a horse. The spending was detrimental to her because she would then go into an even deeper depression, as she also had to worry about financial problems. Another thing that Jamison discussed was her problem being on the medication lithium, which is often prescribed for those with bipolar disorder. Lithium brought about its own set of symptoms, so it was not as if it relieved her entirely of the challenges of bipolar disorder. She often struggled knowing that she had to take the medication to feel better, yet she still often refused against her own medical knowledge. Even the dose of medication was so trivial, as Jamison had trouble concentrating and functioning on lithium, yet when her dose was lowered, she felt that her steps were bouncier than they had been, and that she was taking in sights and sounds that previously had been filtered through thick layers of gauze. Throughout her book, Jamison also experienced stigma for her mental illness. As a budding psychiatrist, she was constantly afraid of what her colleagues and patients would think if they knew she too was suffering from a mental disorder. She was often told by her sister that she should just get through the symptoms of bipolar disorder without taking medication, and she was even told by a colleague that her attempted suicide was disappointing and made her seem weak. So what can we learn from bipolar disorder? The main thing that I learned is that mental disorders are often seen as not a big deal, yet they're very destructive, not only to the person who has it, but to his or her family as well. Those who get help for mental disorder, whether through medication or therapy, are often seen by society as weak. Kay Redfield Jamison, who was a psychiatrist herself and knew the gravity of mental illness, recalled her first time going to therapy when she said, "I went to the student health service with the intention of asking to see a psychiatrist. I got as far as the stairwell just outside the clinic, but was only able to sit there, paralyzed with fear and shame, unable to go in and unable to leave." Even though she understood that bipolar disorder was harming her, she had the mindset that most of society has, which is that mental illness is not a big deal and is a weakness. I think it's crucial for teachers who who are seen as role models to their students, to advocate for those with mental health issues such as bipolar disorder. Emotional disorders are easily hidden, and those who have it sometimes want to pretend that it does not exist. Teachers need to look for warning signs of emotional disorders and help those who have it, providing them understanding and support and making sure that they're not ashamed by their disorder. Specifically for bipolar disorder, teachers need to know that students who have it seek understanding, support, and motivation. These are especially needed in the classroom, as the child can only succeed if the teacher is aiding him or her to accommodate for challenges and have strategies to make use of their advantages that come with the disorder. Teachers need to realize that mania and depression are completely different and that the child may need different accommodations from day to day. It is also important to note that the symptoms of mania and depression often work against each other. What is generated during mania is often too tiresome to carry out during depression. Teachers need to come up with ways for students with bipolar disorder to use the ideas that they come up with during mania and motivate them to finish what they started during depression. Lastly, teachers need to help the students celebrate the strengths that come with bipolar disorder. If a student focuses on the challenges, he or she is bound to fall behind in the classroom. Those with bipolar disorder are incredibly creative and emotionally intuitive. Students with bipolar disorder, with the right accommodations and supports, are more than capable of achieving academic success.